Hi guys. So, want to talk about harnesses and leash pulling. Excuse me. I have a new client. She has a 8 or 9 month old shepherd mix. He's like 90 pounds. He's a big boy. Um, she did a basic obedience class when he was a little younger. A clicker training class. Clicker training is awesome, by the way. Like, you should definitely look into it. It's fantastic. Um, anyway, she did that when he was younger, and they suggested that he be put on a harness to help with leash manners. So I get that a lot. A lot of people are recommended to use harnesses to help with leash manners, and there is some validity to that. If you're going to allow a dog to pull on the leash, put them on a harness because Pip, okay, so if you're going to let a dog pull on a leash, put them on a harness because a harness is designed to distribute the pressure across a larger area of their body, so it's not going to hurt the dog. Like a dog can't hurt itself pulling into a harness like it can pulling into a collar. And a lot of people will use harnesses because their dog pulls on the leash and chokes itself on a collar. That's valid. That's 100% valid. Assuming that you are going to let the dog pull on the leash. That's 100% valid. That's fine. And you can use a harness to teach leash manners. You can. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It just makes it a little harder because you're attaching your leash to the strongest part of the dog's body. And again, that's like the safest way to do it if you're going to let a dog pull on a leash because it can't hurt itself pulling on a harness. That's why sled dogs wear harnesses, is because they can safely pull on that line on the harness without hurting themselves. That's literally what harnesses are designed for. However, the harness itself is not going to teach your dog to walk nicely on a leash. You have to do that through training. You have to teach the dog what leash pressure means. And it's really easy to fall into the trap of using the leash exclusively as a restraint device when you have a harness, because it's a lot easier to just let the dog pull on the harness, pull on the leash, and it's fine. Because again, it's safe to do that. You're not going to harm the dog by letting it pull on a harness on the leash. But it's not going to help your leash manners unless you actively address it. So, using the example of this new client, big dog, 90 pounds. She is about that weight too. So he can and has pulled her down the sidewalk on his harness. She has a waist belt so that he doesn't jerk the leash out of her hands, and she can lean with her whole body into him when he pulls on the leash. So we're instead going to be teaching him how to respond to leash pressure as a communication tool rather than a restraint device. So, like I said, with a harness, it's easier to fall into that trap because you're not doing any harm to the dog by letting the dog pull on the leash when it's in a harness rather than a collar. So, bottom line is that, and I have this in bold capital letters in all of my training handouts and things. The tool does not train the dog. The training trains the dog. So you can use a harness to teach the dog to walk nicely on a leash. You can teach the dog to respond to leash pressure with a harness. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. And like I said, it's the safer option if the dog is going to pull on a leash to pull on a harness rather than on a collar. But it's going to be a lot easier if you use a collar, because if you do it properly, the dog is never going to be pulling against the collar. And it's a lot easier to communicate with the dog through a collar than with a harness because it's more localized pressure and you're not pulling against the whole body like with a harness. And when you're pulling on a whole, excuse me, if you're pulling on the whole body, you tend to activate the dog's oppositional reflex. So like if you walk up to any dog or any horse, especially horses are the worst with this. If you walk up to any horse and just like put your hand on them and push, they will push back on you. Like they will lean back against you. And dogs are the same way. It is not in their nature to yield to pressure just naturally. It's Pip. You can kill this dog. It's not in their nature to yield to pressure naturally. You have to teach them to do that. And when you use a harness, you are more likely to activate that oppositional reflex by putting more pressure across a larger area of the body. It's easier for that dog to activate into that oppositional reflex and pull against that harness. Again, like I said, it is very possible to teach a dog to walk properly on a harness. It's just gonna be harder. And that's okay. If you're looking for that, then that's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. I'm not someone that's going to be like, oh, you should never use harnesses, just because, like, just in the same way that I hate when people say, oh, you should never use prong collars or you should never use e-collars. It's just a tool, you know, like it's not anything that, like, if you can misuse a harness just like you can misuse a prong collar. And I'm not going to tell you that those are equivalent. Like, misusing a harness is not going to cause the same amount of damage psychologically and physically as grossly misusing a prong collar. I'm never going to tell you that those two are equivalent in that way. But tools can always be misused. So I'm not going to tell you that I hate harnesses, that you should never use harnesses, because it's just a tool. Like, it's fine. It's not that big of a deal. I have another client that has a dog that has a collapsed trachea, so we're working him on a harness, obviously. We can use a gentle leader on him, but he absolutely hates it, and I really just don't feel like putting the time in, and the owners don't really feel like putting the time in to condition the dog to the gentle leader, so we're just going to use a harness. And he's an 80-pound bulldog. Like, he's a big dog, but he responds really well to the harness, and it works. So I'm not going to tell you that you should never use harnesses. But it's more likely that you're going to make your job a little more difficult if you're using a harness. Also, it kind of go down the line, like if you have a dog that, especially like this dog, for example, this dog is 90 pounds. The owner's about 90 pounds. If he reacts to a squirrel or another dog, and Pip just grabbed a glove off of my coffee table and was going to chew on it. If this dog sees something that he wants to go after, like young dogs do, a harness is going to make it a lot easier for that dog to drag his owner down. So we're not going to use a harness on him. We are using just a regular martingale collar to teach him what leash pressure means. And once we teach him what leash pressure means, then he should be good. I might do the same. This is actually a sibling to the other dog that I worked with, did the same thing, taught him what leash pressure meant, taught him how to walk properly on a leash, and then I put a prong collar on him because it is a mechanical advantage for a big dog and a little owner. But this isn't a conversation about tools. It's just, well, it is because it's harnesses. But bottom line, the training trains the dog. The tool just makes it a little easier or a little harder. I don't have a problem if you want to use a harness to teach your dog to walk on a leash. Like, that's fine. Just understand that the harness isn't going to do the teaching. You have to do the teaching. Okay? Okay, if you have any more questions, if you want me to talk about this more, let me know.